Before we dive in, I want to give a quick content warning. In this video, we're going to be talking about intrusive thoughts, obsessive thinking, and the concept of the law of attraction, all in relation to OCD. If these topics are triggering for you, feel free to actually skip this episode or actually come back when you're feeling ready. So let's really get into it. Today we're tackling a topic that actually it impacts a lot of people with OCD, and that is the idea that our thoughts can in some way control reality. You've probably heard of the law of attraction, right? It's that idea that if you think something good or bad, it eventually will happen. Now, obviously, for people with OCD, that can be a terrifying idea. Imagine being terrified that your negative or intrusive thoughts could actually cause bad things to happen. It's a real struggle and something that I think can be very, very difficult for people with OCD. So in this episode, I'm going to break down why the law of attraction can be especially harmful for people with OCD. And then I'll share two strategies to help manage those tough thoughts, one from CBT and another using mindfulness and ACT. So if you've ever felt trapped by your own thoughts, stick around. And hey, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe and ring the notification bell for more content like this. The Anxiety and Depression Association of America state that magical thinking is the belief that your thoughts or actions can cause real life consequences with no direct logical connection between them. So let's get into this. A listener reached out after our last episode expressing concern about a part of the discussion where the law of attraction was mentioned. The idea that what we think or worry about might manifest in our lives. The listener pointed out that this can actually be really distressing for people with OCD, as it can reinforce the fear that their thoughts have real world consequences. So the first thing that I really wanted to do is to apologise if this caused any discomfort to you. I had originally planned to edit this part out of the podcast, but I forgot due to the fact that I recorded the episode 4 months prior to me publishing it. I truly appreciate the listener for bringing this up, and it's given me the opportunity to actually address it today. So let's discuss why the law of attraction can be harmful, especially for people with OCD. Many people with OCD experience something called magical thinking, where they believe that their thoughts can actually influence real life outcomes. For example, you might think, if I have a negative thought about a loved one, I'll make something bad happen to them. However, the reality is that thoughts are not actions. They don't control what actually happens in the real world. There's no scientific evidence supporting the idea that thoughts can attract events. If that were the case, people with OCD would be dealing with all sorts of difficult things every single day, but that's not what actually happens. It's important to understand that having intrusive or obsessive thoughts is just part of how OCD works, and these thoughts don't reflect reality. One useful approach to managing magical thinking from cognitive behavioral therapy is actually something called thought labeling. It's a simple strategy, but it's actually very effective, and it's where we address the intrusive thoughts without getting caught up in them. When an intrusive thought arises, instead of actually engaging with it or trying to push it away, you can simply label it for what it is. For example, you might say, this is just an intrusive thought, or this is my OCD talking. By labeling it, or you're effectively acknowledging the thought, but not giving it any power or control over you. Now, a key thing to keep in mind is that this approach is not about going round in circles or trying to find evidence to argue with the thought. It's tempting to try and disprove the thought, but by looking for reasons that it's not true, that can actually turn into a compulsion in itself. Compulsively trying to refute a thought over and over actually reinforces the obsession and keeps you stuck in that loop. Instead, the goal is to accept that the thought is there, recognize that it's part of OCD, and then refocus your attention on what you're doing in the present moment. The reality is that you have already thought about this a lot. You know already that your thinking on this is irrational. So, the aim is to let go of it and to stop paying so much attention to it. By postponing doing anything about it at all, you allow your nervous system to settle down and the moment begins to pass. You begin to feel better as you realize that this is just the OCD trying to trick you and that you don't actually need to concern yourself with this. The second strategy comes from mindfulness and ACT. And it's really about learning how to bring more acceptance to intrusive thoughts rather than trying to fight with them or to control them. In mindfulness, you focus on observing your thoughts without judgment. When an intrusive thought pops up, instead of engaging with it or reacting to it, you can acknowledge it and then let it pass, much like watching clouds drift across the sky. The key is to remain present and to not get attached to the thought. ACT takes this a step further by using something called cognitive diffusion. And this is where you learn to separate yourself from your thoughts so that they don't feel as overwhelming or real. A great way to practice diffusion is by mentally saying, I am noticing that I'm having the thought that, before stating what the thought is. For example, instead of thinking, I'm going to cause harm because of my thoughts, you can say, I am noticing that I'm having the thought that I could cause harm. And this slight shift helps you create distance and separation between yourself and the thought, reminding you that the thought is not a fact. It's just something that your mind is producing like background noise. And the ACT approach also teaches you to focus on what really actually matters to you. Instead of trying to control your thoughts or eliminate them, ACT actually encourages you to accept and refocus on your values, on what's meaningful in your life. So if you're spending time with your loved ones and intrusive thoughts come up, you can acknowledge the thoughts, let them be there, and then do your best to return your attention to the people and the things that you care about. The idea is to live in accordance with your values, even when your mind throws difficult thoughts your way. It's important to understand that thoughts are just thoughts. They don't have any power to shape reality. Many people with OCD experience what's called thought-action fusion. The belief that having a thought is actually as bad as acting on that thought. But thoughts are just mental events, not actions, and they don't reflect who you are or what will happen. By using these techniques, whether it's thought labeling to avoid compulsions or mindfulness and diffusion to distance yourself from intrusive thoughts, you can actually learn to manage magical thinking and to live a life that's not controlled by obsessive thoughts. This whole experience has been a valuable reminder of how important it is, I think, to be thoughtful about these things. But it's also been a great opportunity to dive into these techniques that can help anyone struggling with magical thinking or intrusive thoughts. So to wrap things up, remember that your thoughts don't define you and they don't control what actually happens in the real world. By practicing thought labeling, diffusion, and mindfulness, you can learn to manage intrusive thoughts and live in accordance to your values, not your fears. Please do subscribe to the channel and let me know what you think in the comments below.
This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are dealing with OCD, anxiety, or any mental health concerns, please consult a licensed mental health professional for support.